ticks. What are ticks? Ticks are arachnids, much like a spider, a scorpion, and a mite. While most tick bites do not transmit infectious disease, some very serious infections can be contracted from the bite of this vector. For example, you know some of these: Lyme disease, babesiosis, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, to name a few. Joining me now to discuss ticks and preventing tick bites is Daniel Wolff. Dan is the president and founder of TickEase Incorporated, a products manufacturing company whose mission is to provide safe and effective tools for removing and repelling ticks, facilitating tick testing, and educating the public for the prevention of tick-borne illnesses like the Lyme disease. Hi, Dan, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming on to give us your expertise. Let's go ahead and start with a general overview for my radio audience concerning ticks.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Excellent.
One of my favorite topics,
Yeah.
ticks and bugs. Although, for some reason, I do have an aversion to spiders. However, I am fascinated by ticks.
Okay.
And you did mention earlier that ticks are part of the arachnid family, or arthropods. And what's interesting to me anyway, is that when ticks hatch out of their eggs, they actually have 6 legs, much like insects. But when they transition to their next stage, or the nymphal stage of their life, they sprout an extra pair of legs, which then is more characteristic of being an arachnid. Ticks are what we classify as an external parasite, and they've been around for as long as I guess people have been keeping track of mammals and other creatures that have blood in their system. So they have been put on this planet to do nothing more than to have blood meals, and I guess at this stage in history, just cause problems through vector-borne illness. And let me just mention to you that when I talk about ticks, my area of expertise really surrounded in the deer tick, or Zoetis scapularis.
Right.
I'm up here in the Northeast in the Boston area, and we have a significant issue where we're at crisis levels here for Lyme disease. So when I do refer to the tick, I'm talking about the black-legged or the deer tick up here. And, of course, there are other types of ticks in different parts of the country and the world, and I think what's happening now is there's kind of an evolution of different types of ticks starting to become more prevalent in different types of areas, and I'm not sure for what the exact reason is, but many people seem to think that climate change or changes in the environment and the weather patterns seem to encourage this type of not only spreading of black-legged ticks, but the introduction of new species into areas where they weren't before. So ticks actually have a life cycle of about 2 years in my area, and it's interesting that they only feed 3 times. They need nourishment to help transition themselves into the next stage of life. So if you think about it, the tick is hatched from an egg, and that stage of life is called the larva. It then will have a blood meal and transition into what's called a nymph, and then the nymph will transition into an adult. And it's interesting, not all adult ticks will feed their last time, because the males are more interested in fertilizing the female. So typically they will find a female on its host during the last blood meal, mate with the female, and then die. The females will then take a blood meal, fall off, and then lay eggs. And it's surprising, but they can lay up to and in excess of 2,000 eggs per female. And after they do lay their eggs, then the females will die. So this process takes about 2 years, and they will feed approximately 3 times. So they go months and months without feeding, where they're just happy to be hanging around and waiting for their next meal to walk by, so to speak.
Now, you mentioned 3 different stages of development for the tick, Dan. Do all these stages, are they all capable of spreading disease?
The answer is yes and no. our deer ticks up here, and if we're talking about Lyme disease, which is certainly the most, the most known of the pathogens or the infections that people get from the deer tick, even though there's many, many different types of microbes that can be transmitted and cause infection, including bacterial, viral, and also parasites.
Right.
That can be Babesia, for example, is a parasite, and it has an effect on the body similar to malaria. But if we're going to talk about the bacteria that causes Lyme, the main culprit is what we refer to as Borrelia burgdorferi. Now, scientists and researchers have found that when an egg when a larval tick hatches from its egg, it is clean, meaning it can only get that bacteria from an infected host. There is a new type of bacteria. It's very similar. It's called Borrelia miyamotoi, which has been found to be transmitted through the egg. So that is really bad news because most people have no idea that a larval deer tick is even on them or has bitten them. And usually you're okay because it's up until recently it's been, not a problem. It's been non-infectious. But with this Borrelia miyamotoi, we're now going to have to start worrying about that. So I think when that bacteria becomes more prevalent in our area, we're going to experience a whole bunch of different problems with people getting sick from the miyamotoi strain.
Okay. Now, tick bites and tick-borne diseases are completely preventable. And you wrote an article on LinkedIn, I believe it was, and I asked if I could syndicate it on the website. And it was concerning checking yourself for ticks, and it had a nice hint of humor to it. Would you give me the pleasure of going over some of your recommendations?
I'd be happy to, and I will add that I'm a big fan of humor, even in serious situations.
Right.
So please don't misinterpret that if I am taking a very serious topic, but kind of funning it up a little bit. That's just kind of my method of education.
Fantastic.
So just again, keep in mind these are very serious topics, but we can make it a little bit humorous so that people can remember maybe these points that are important. So yes, and I do say in the blog, and first of all, it's entitled "Don't Neglect Your Crevices," and this was a video blog that I did to encourage people to check themselves on a regular basis and to do the tick checks properly. So I say, it's completely preventable, tick bites and tick-borne illness, of course, if you don't get bitten. So in the video, I mentioned that you can lock yourself in a interior room deep inside of a building, and never come out, and you'll be guaranteed you're not going to get bitten by a tick. But knowing that is completely impractical for most of us, there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself as best as possible. So if you live in an area where there are ticks, and especially if you have a pet that you take out, your dog, and you take for walks, or you're a hiker, an outdoors person, you should be very aware of where these ticks are, what times of the years are more active, and how to protect yourself. And just one area is, again, this don't neglect your crevices, or make sure that you're doing proper tick checks. If you have been outside, maybe you're in the garden or raking leaves in the spring or the fall, which are the two most active times in our climate in the Northeast for ticks. In the spring, it's the nymphal ticks that are very active and hungry, and in the fall, it's the adult deer ticks that come out and are feeding, and they're feeding now. And one important thing to remember is that the weather has a lot to do with tick activity, and right now we are experiencing kind of the perfect storm for currently for tick activity, and I think in the near future, meaning the spring and summer of next year, for an increase in reported cases due to what's going on now with our weather. And I guess the rest of the winter will help determine how how bad it will be, but if it does stay warm like this, we had a very large nut crop, meaning acorns,
right,
which then feeds the rodents, which will then make that population robust. And then we also have a large deer population, which helps to spread the ticks, and the ticks will then be feeding. Have more to feed. There'll be more ticks. So my feeling is that when these ticks stage up in their life cycles, particularly into the adult stages, there'll be more. There might be a higher percentage of infection. That's, again, not good news. So if you're outside, you come inside. My first recommendation is, if you have the kids or yourself, is to strip down, take off your clothes, immediately put them into a hot dryer. If it's warm outside, maybe 20 minutes. If you're wearing winter clothing, because of the insulating factors of the clothing, you want to put them in for a little bit longer, maybe up to 40 or 45 minutes. Now, ticks hate dry heat, so the dryer is a perfect environment to kill them. Then you can go ahead and wash them. Of course, while you're naked, it's a good opportunity to get yourself into a well-lighted room and either have someone else help you or just do it with the mirror. Just check yourself very carefully from head to toe, paying particular attention to, it's interesting, between your toes, your belly button, around your belt line, under your arms, in your groin, and behind your ears and on your hairline. Another good tip is maybe in that evening or when you have a chance to sit down and you're relaxing, just to run your fingers through your hair for a period of time to just feel for anything unusual. I know it's more difficult in that, in your hair, in your scalp. And it's also going to be difficult if it's springtime and nymphal stage deer ticks are out because they're very small.
Right.
I've had 2 separate occasions where nymphal ticks have been feeding on me in my belly button. I also mostly wear boots when I'm outside, and I don't know how they get into these spaces, but between my toes, I had a tick that night. I was wearing socks and 8-inch work boots tied up to the top. So how it got there, I just don't know, but it was there, and unfortunately, I've had the experience of having probably close to 200 embedded ticks in my body during the last 20 years because I do a lot of work outside studying the suburban phenomenon of this deer population that we're experiencing now. So I'm in the thick of it, and it's interesting that because of this warm December we're having, I'm still pulling ticks off now, which is very unusual. And my dogs are still picking them up as well. So those are some general tips. I like to put a little notice in my bathroom to remind me that when I'm going to take a shower, that's a good time to turn around and check, especially on your back where it's hard to see. And you can also, if you're sitting down on the toilet, you can put a Post-it note where you can see it. Mine says, "Here I sit and wonder why I have to check for ticks where the sun don't shine." So
fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a better vantage point for men and women who are in that position to take a look where the ticks like to go, in particular in the groin or the crotch area.
Okay. Now, the article that you were just describing, you published it over the summer. However, preventing ticks is a year-long endeavor, including now the winter. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, well, again, I'm talking, my experience is in the Northeast climate, so in my area, that's where I have most knowledge about this, but it varies depending on the climate. I like to say deer tick season starts early in January and it wraps up sometime after Christmas. So it's pretty much a year-round thing, and again, it is affected greatly by the climate. And once the temperature and last year, I'm sure your listeners may have heard that we had a bit of a snowy winter last year up here,
right?
And that people think, oh, well, that would be great because all that snow must have killed the ticks. In fact, that's incorrect. The snow was acting as an insulator for the ticks, so it's much better for ticks to live over the winter with a blanket of snow rather than no snow cover and frigid temperatures. So There has been no real decrease in tick activity because we've had the warmest December pretty much ever so far. And I'm still picking them up even as early, even yesterday I was picking up ticks. So it just depends, and just be aware that if it's cold for a period of time, the tick activity will decrease pretty much to nothing. If the temperature increases over freezing, I'd say between 35 and 40 degrees, and holds for a few days, then you will see sort of a reemergence of activity, and you certainly continue to do your tick checks and take your preventative measures.
Now, the thing with tick bites, particularly with like Lyme disease, is the amount of time that it's present on your body. So what's the appropriate way to remove a tick?
Well, I mean, in this case, simple is better. There's a lot of products on the market that, this is a tick removal products that claim to be really effective on all types of ticks at all stages of their life. And I would argue with that because these devices, in my opinion, were designed for animals to remove engorged larger ticks like the dog tick. Right. And I've done my own testing, and it shows that these many of them are what I call the slotted scoop method, sort of a V, tapered V in a plastic or a other type of device. Now, there's a product out there called the Tick Twister. I would not recommend using this because it is absolutely not necessary to ever twist the tick. Even the CDC's website says never twist or jerk the tick out. Now, knowing the anatomy of a tick's mouth parts, the hypostome, which is the portion of the tick's mouth part that actually inserts itself into the skin, that part of its body is barbed, not threaded. So twisting, again, is unnecessary. And my research has determined that nymphal and larval stage deer ticks are just too small to get caught in the scoop. So using those products on those particular types of ticks might do more damage than good because you're going to agitate that tick. And two things you don't want to do with an embedded tick. One is to squeeze it in the wrong place and force pathogens into your system. Mm-hmm. And two is to agitate or traumatize that tick with heat, substance, or even just to move it around in the wrong way, because a lot of the times that agitation will cause the tick to actually regurgitate abdominal contents straight into your system and therefore increase your exposure. But back to your question about removing and the time frame, the Borrelia bacteria that causes Lyme tends to remain dormant in the midgut of that tick until the tick starts feeding, and the action or the act of feeding will activate it, so to speak, and it takes a little while for that bacteria to get up, to kind of wake up and get into the salivary glands and into the host. So typically, the research that I've read says about 24 to 36 hours, and I use a 24-hour rule myself just to be safe. And so, typically if you know, or if you can really give it a good guess that tick has been in you less than 24 hours, I feel pretty safe that I'm not going to be affected by that bacteria. Other physicians may recommend a prophylactic dose of antibiotics, a one-time thing, and some physicians will recommend a full course of doxycycline. And there's just a lot of different opinions and options available. We don't have a consistent treatment because we don't have an accurate way to determine exactly who has been infected by Borrelia. But simply using a fine-tipped or pointy tweezer, grasping the tick as close to the skin surface as possible, and pulling straight up firmly, and that's really it. There's no magic solution or tricks to this. It's just basic tweezer. Not basic tweezers. Fine-tip tweezers are really the way to go. Your household tweezers are difficult because of the flat end that they have, and this will cause potential for squeezing the tick in the abdomen or tearing the tick from your skin. So you do want to use those fine-tip tweezers. And that's what I did just sort of out of necessity. I designed a two-sided tweezer called TickEase.
Right.
That will allow you to, it's got a fine-tipped angled tweezer so you can get into those tricky spots like a belly button or between your toes. And it's very pointy, so it is sharp. So you have to be a little cautious of that. You don't want to poke yourself, but it's sharp for a reason, and that is to get down below the hard shell. It's called the scutum, which is right above the mouth parts. Squeeze and lift straight out. The backside of the tool, I did utilize the slotted scoop method for larger ticks. So people and pets can use this product. It is made out of stainless steel. So in the medical or veterinary fields, you certainly can heat sterilize it without damaging it. So it's very durable. And it has a lot of household uses as well. It can be used as a splinter puller or a suture remover, and I've used it for a whole bunch of different things.
Very good. All right, Dan, we got about a minute left.
Okay.
So if someone would like to learn more about ticks or purchase a TickEase tweezer, where should they go?
Well, they can certainly find me anytime, and I'm do my best to respond personally to all inquiries at Dan@TickEase, TickEase.com. I do have a toll-free number, which is pretty easy to remember. It's 855-TICK-READY, and they can purchase the product, probably would be the easiest on the website, which is TickEase.com. And we also sell very well on Amazon, and we will be going live on Jet.com, hopefully within the next week or so.
Excellent, excellent. I'm on your website right now, and very informative site, great videos, great testimonials. Thank you, Dan Wolff, for this very informative discussion.
Well, happy to do it, and I appreciate you having me, Robert, and I hope you and all the listeners have a great holiday season.
Same to you, my brother. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.